Episode 57 CT February 2nd, 2025, Economic Effects of U.S. Tariffs on Canada and Mexico starting Tuesday. In Episode 57 CT1 Introduction RAWSEP View, the United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. 2A RAWSEP View Lee Zeldin. Now the Trump EPA Chief is expected to erase rules to fight climate change and chemical pollution. Zeldin is expected to weaken tailpipe emission regulations. Sean Duffy. Now Department of Transportation Chief plans to weaken fuel economy standards. Together the two weakenings should lower the amount and percentage of electric vehicles manufactured in the United States, while China may gain more market share of electric vehicles. 2B RAWSEP View, the Democratic Party explanation of why the poor working class and middle class are facing continued high prices and high costs because of the economic effects of Trump directives are expected to be the major argument for the general public and the working class voting for the Democratic Party in 2026. 2C RAWSEP View. In 2019, the current flood of Trump directives was predicted by a longtime Trump advisor. This article concludes that Trump is trying to persuade you of something that is not true. Do not believe him. Trump self-deception could doom the Trump presidency. 2D RAWSEP View. Mainstream media such as ABC CBS and NBC have lost offices in the Pentagon and are replaced by Fox News offices. 2E RAWSEP View. Senator Curtis of Utah may vote as Mitt Romney voted when he was senator of Utah. Curtis won the Utah Republican primary against the Trump-chosen candidate and became one of two United States senators from Utah in January 2025. 2F RAWSEP View. Trump is setting up a choice for Republican legislators: either choose tax cuts for the rich or choose health care for Americans through Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act. 2G RAWSEP View. The 22 Democratic United States targeted for defunding by Trump are given a temporary reprieve by a judge. 2H RAWSEP View. Nonprofits affected by Trump defunding are asked to contact the New York Times to tell their stories. 3A RAWSEP View. The Trump tariffs on goods from Canada and Mexico, as well as China, are expected to lead to higher prices for United States consumers. 3B RAWSEP View. Trudeau detailed Canada tariffs on the United States that he would target on United States Republican states. 3C RAWSEP View. Canada and Mexico tariffs will raise prices on 40% of automobiles sold in the United States. 3D RAWSEP View. Trump is using blunt force in dealing with both traditional allies and traditional enemies. The rest of the world does not like it. Main content. 1 Introduction RAWSEP View. The United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only for home building and furniture building. For just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions, yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry, and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue. Presumably because it is called renewable. Wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree, but it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM 2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut-down and burned tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM 2.5 particulate matter of 25 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lungs, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM 2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom, the Eco-Design Wood Stove, and International Convention. Based on the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning, the emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. Burning wood instead of coal increases the adverse health effects of PM 2.5 air pollution and hastens climate change. Stopping burning wood for residential home heating is an easy, incremental way to be kind to your neighbor and to the planet. Choosing to burn wood when burning wood when it is more expensive than heating your home with a heat pump that is less expensive when you use the United States heat pump rebates available in 2025 in many states is like choosing a gas-powered car above an electric car when both are of equal price. Many of the Trump tariffs will result in less manufacture of clean electric vehicles in the United States and less price reduction to customers on existing electric vehicles. 2A United States Environmental Protection Agency Senate confirms Lee Zeldin to head EPA. The former New York congressman has little experience in environmental policy. He is expected to follow orders to weaken climate rules. 2A RAWSEP View Lee Zeldin. Now the Trump EPA chief is to expected erase rules to fight climate change and chemical pollution. Zeldin is expected to weaken tailpipe emission regulations. Sean Duffy. Now Department of Transportation Chief plans to weaken fuel economy standards. Together the two weakenings should lower the amount and percentage of electric vehicles manufactured in the United States, while China may gain more market share of electric vehicles. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. New York Times, January 29, 2025. The Senate on Wednesday voted to confirm Lee Zeldin to run the Environmental Protection Agency, where he will be charged with executing President Trump orders to dismantle major environmental regulations and possibly parts of the 55-year-old agency itself. The Senate voted 56-42 to confirm Zeldin, a former House member with little experience in environmental regulation. He is expected to work to erase rules to fight climate change and chemical pollution. In his Senate confirmation hearing on January 16, Zeldin told lawmakers that he grasped the basic science of climate change, but Zeldin has also been directed to dismantle the largest climate rule ever enacted by the federal government. The rule finalized last year would cut tailpipe emissions of greenhouse gases, the nation's largest source of planet-warming pollution, by compelling automakers to increase sales of hybrid and all-electric vehicles. Trump incorrectly refers to the rule as the EV mandate. The rule does not ban gas-powered vehicles. Zeldin would not say how he intends to handle the tailpipe regulation, telling senators, "I am not allowed to prejudge the outcomes going into rule-making." However, Sean Duffy, the new transportation secretary, released a memo just hours after he was confirmed announcing plans to weaken auto fuel economy standards, which are a companion to the EPA emissions limits under the Biden administration. The pair of rules worked in tandem to reduce pollution and were both aimed at the same goal of ensuring that more than half of new passenger vehicles sold in the United States are all electric by 2032. Since Trump won the presidential election, auto companies asked him to maintain some form of the Biden rules, although with some adjustments such as lowered penalties for non-compliance. While they have chafed at the requirements to rapidly increase sales of electric vehicles, automakers have also invested billions to transition to EVs. Automakers fear that if the rules are erased, they could be undercut by companies selling cheaper gas-powered cars. They are also concerned that it could hurt American competitiveness with China, home to the world's largest EV manufacturer, and hurt an industry that is a backbone of American manufacturing and employs 11 million people. To be United States Democratic Party strategy is to point out when Trump does not lower costs. Democratic leaders prioritize how to confront an aggressive right-wing administration. Reporting from the Democratic National Committee gathering in Oxon Hill, MD. To be RAWSEP View, the Democratic Party explanation of why the poor, working class, and middle class are facing continued high prices and high costs because of the economic effects of Trump directives are expected to be the major argument for the general public and the working class voting for the Democratic Party in 2026. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates of 501c3 nonprofit organization. New York Times, February 2, 2025. As Democrats face the reality of President Trump's second term, they share a fundamental belief this moment calls for an inspirational message from their party in an election this weekend for chair of the Democratic National Committee. The party chose a candidate, Ken Martin of Minnesota, who said he planned to conduct a post-election review largely focused on tactics and messaging. Martin said he had not determined the parameters of the review. Other than that, he was not interested in discussing whether former President Joseph R. Biden Jr. should have sought re-election. Governors, members of the Senate, and the House state attorneys general, grassroots leaders, and DNC members offered a wide range of views about the direction of their party. Gov. J.B. Pritzker, an Illinois Democrat, said in an interview, "We have got to stand up and fight, and by the way, at the state level I think many of us are, but I think that we have got to make sure that in the Senate and the House that the people who have a platform are standing up." Democrats broadly agree that they need to do more to address the issues that powered Trump campaign, like grocery costs, inflation, and immigration. A healthy segment of the party believes that a narrow focus on the economy is the best way to win back voters who supported Trump because they hoped he would lower prices and make their lives easier. There are people in the middle, and trust me, there are a lot of them, that wanted costs to go down, said Senator Amy Klobuchar, Democrat of Minnesota. Instead, what they see is chaos going up, corruption going up with the firing of the inspector generals, and guess what else is going up? Egg prices. But Representative Robert Garcia, Democrat of California, warned that presenting an alternate vision for the country could be more difficult given Trump alliance with leading social media and communications moguls. "We are not just up against Donald Trump, we are up against the richest billionaires in the country who control much of our communication apparatus," Garcia said. "We have got to start calling it like it is, and I think the American public and working class people who make up a majority of this country will understand that." To see United States Steve Bannon predictions of what to expect from a second Trump presidency. If you want to understand the first few weeks of the second Trump administration, you should listen to what Steve Bannon told PBS Frontline in 2019. To see RAWSEP View. In 2019, the current flood of Trump directives was predicted by a longtime Trump advisor. This article concludes that Trump is trying to persuade you of something that is not true. Do not believe him. Trump's self-deception could doom the Trump presidency. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates of 501c3 nonprofit organization. New York Times, February 2, 2025. Quotes from Steve Bannon: "The opposition party is the media, and the media can only focus on one thing at a time. All we have to do is flood the zone." Bannon insight here is real. RAWSEP key excerpts on how to oppose the Trump flood. Focus is the fundamental substance of democracy. It is particularly the substance of opposition. People largely learn of what the government is doing through the media, be it mainstream media or social media. If you overwhelm the media, if you give it too many places, it needs to look all at once. If you keep it moving from one thing to the next, no coherent opposition can emerge. It is hard to even think coherently. Donald Trump's first 2 weeks in the White House have followed Bannon's strategy like a script. The flood is the point, the overwhelm is the point. The message was not in any one executive order or announcement, it was in the cumulative effect of all of them. The sense that this is Trump country now, this is his government now, it follows his will, it does what he wants. If Trump tells the state to stop spending money, the money stops. Or so he wants you to think. In Trump's first term, we were told do not normalize him. In his second, the task is different. Do not believe him. Trump may not see his own fork in the road coming. He may believe he has the power. He is claiming that would be a mistake on his part, a self-deception that could doom his presidency. But the real threat is if he persuades the rest of us to believe he has power. He does not have. The first 2 weeks of Trump presidency have not shown his strength. He is trying to overwhelm you. He is trying to keep you off balance. He is trying to persuade you of something that is not true. Do not believe him. 2D Trump administration to remove 4 major news outlets from Pentagon office space. The New York Times, NBC News, NPR, and Politico will be replaced by outlets including the right-wing site Breitbart News as part of a new annual media rotation. 2D RAWSEP View Mainstream media such as ABC, CBS, and NBC have lost offices in the Pentagon and are replaced by Fox News offices. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates of 501c3 nonprofit organization. New York Times, February 1st, 2025. The Trump administration notified 4 major news organizations late on Friday that they would have to give up their dedicated office space at the Pentagon to make way for other outlets, including the right-wing sites Breitbart News and One American News. In a memo, a Department of Defense spokesman John Oliot said that the New York Times, NBC News, NPR, and Politico had to vacate their office space by February 14th, 2025. Two United States Republicans in the Senate. This Republican senator says Trump needs to hear dissent. Will he speak up? Senator John Curtis prides himself on collaborating with people who disagree with him, but with a Republican trifecta in place, it's not clear whether Mitt Romney's successor will follow in his footsteps. Reporting from the Capitol, 2E RAWSEP View Senator Curtis of Utah may vote as Mitt Romney voted when he was senator of Utah. Curtis won the Utah Republican primary against the Trump-chosen candidate and became one of two United States senators from Utah in January 2025. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP 4. Brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. New York Times, February 2, 2025. Senator John Curtis, Republican of Utah, had not yet been sworn in for his first term, nor opened his mouth to say much of anything in public when he found himself under attack by President Trump's most fervent supporters for the alleged sin of being insufficiently loyal. "I am tired of rhino Republicans running everything Charlie Kirk the right wing," provocateur declared on X, using a term that stands for Republican in name only to condemn Curtis and three other Republicans he claimed had derailed former Representative Matt Gaetz, Trump first pick for Attorney General. Curtis, 64, a former House member and mayor who has labeled himself normal and made headlines for saying he unafraid to disagree with Trump, may be in for a similar tempest in the days to come. All eyes are on him as a potentially critical swing vote as the Senate prepares to consider three of Trump's more polarizing nominees. Among them is Tulsi Gabbard, whose candidacy for Director of National Intelligence appears to be in jeopardy after an hours-long confirmation hearing on Thursday before the Intelligence Committee. Curtis, who privately met with Ms. Gabbard earlier this month, sat in on her confirmation hearing on Thursday since last June, when he defeated the Trump-backed candidate in a four-way primary with just under 50% of the vote. Curtis has stirred speculation that he may be part of a vanishingly small group of Republicans willing to break with Trump in a closely divided Senate, where his party holds just a three-seat majority. He has previously said that he's not afraid to push back on Trump, especially on issues that are important to Utahns like access to public lands and natural resources, energy independence, and countering China influence. A former Provo city councilor and a close confidant of Curtis said his friend often laments how colleagues who are so cordial in private can turn around and make scathing remarks on the chamber floor or in TV interviews. "I do not know how long he will be a senator. He may be a one-term senator like Mitt Romney." Winterton said it's going to be harder for him to navigate the politics rather than the policies. 2F United States tax cuts for the rich at the expense of all other income groups. Guest essay: The Republican choice, tax cuts for the rich or health care for Americans. 2F RAWSEP View Trump is setting up a choice for Republican legislators: either choose tax cuts for the rich or choose health care for Americans through Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. New York Times, February 2, 2025. Last week was brutal for anyone who cares about the future of health insurance for low and middle income Americans. On Tuesday, the federal government Medicaid funding portals temporarily shut down, sending doctors, patients, and hospitals into a panic. The next day, President Trump nominee for Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. fumbled basic facts about the program during a Senate hearing, despite the fact that it covers more than 70 million Americans. In the House of Representatives, meanwhile, legislators are circulating a so-called menu of spending cuts that would gut access to health care at that last threat that could prove the most devastating and long-lasting. You see, the Trump administration faces a dilemma. The president has promised to extend the 2017 tax cuts, nearly half of which will go to the wealthiest 5% of Americans at a hefty cost of $4 trillion over the next decade, but many Republicans are reluctant to add to the federal deficit. How do they square the math? It appears they are prepared to do so at the expense of the poor and middle class by yanking health care coverage from children, new mothers, people with disabilities, and seniors. Republican leaders in Congress have suggested that one option they are considering to bankroll their tax breaks would be to cut hundreds of billions from Medicaid. Another proposal would roll back subsidies that have helped middle-class families pay Affordable Care Act premiums. They have made it clear they want to finalize legislation in the first 100 days of Trump presidency. It's hard to overstate how catastrophic the proposed cuts would be. Medicaid alone covers more than 40% of births in the United States. Far from being a handout, it is one of the most cost-effective insurance programs in the country, meaning there is very little fat to cut without immediately harming people. Because of Medicaid, that children, seniors, and people with disabilities groups that make up more than 75% of the program spending can see doctors and fill prescriptions without going bankrupt. Let's shift the conversation away from stripping benefits and toward addressing what really drives up costs. According to years of research, high prices and bloated administration gutting Medicaid, or making it impossible for middle-class Americans to afford ACA exchange plans, is callous. 2G United States Trump defunding of 22 Democratic United States, temporarily halted by a judge. Federal judge orders White House to keep money flowing to 22 states. A court in Rhode Island issued a temporary restraining order to block Trump directive to defund programs he considers to be woke. Asterisk reporting on the federal courts from Philadelphia. 2G RAWSEP View. The 22 Democratic United States targeted for defunding by Trump are given a temporary reprieve by a judge. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP 4. Brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. New York Times, January 31, 2025. A federal judge on Friday ordered the Trump administration to keep taxpayer dollars flowing to 22 Democratic-leaning states for all congressionally approved government programs, including those that could run afoul of President Trump's ideological tests. The decision, signed by Judge John J. McConnell Jr., is a temporary but significant victory for the Democratic attorneys general from those states and the District of Columbia, who sued the administration in U.S. District Court for the District of Rhode Island. The order applies only to the states that filed the lawsuit. It requires the administration not to pause, freeze, impede, block, cancel, or terminate taxpayer money already allocated by Congress. The 13-page order, for which Judge McConnell did not specify expiration date, adds an obstacle to Trump plans to aggressively reshape the government around his own agenda. A federal judge in Washington, D.C. issued an earlier administrative stay on Tuesday, blocking the initial order from the White House Office of Management and Budget to freeze as much as $3 trillion in federal money while the review for ideological compliance continued. That stay was set to expire on Monday. The Supreme Court already answered the question of whether the president can withhold congressionally allocated money in 1975, said David A. Super, a professor at Georgetown law that was when the court found that President Richard Nixon could not direct the Environmental Protection Agency to withhold money allocated to cities for sewers and sewage treatment under the Federal Water Pollution Control Act. The Supreme Court unanimously held that the president has no inherent authority to withhold the money, he said, but the current court has shown deference to presidential authority and a willingness to overturn its own precedent. 2H United States Trump defunding effect on United States nonprofits. Has your nonprofit been affected by federal funding cuts? We want to hear from you. The Trump administration is slashing federal grants. The New York Times wants to talk to nonprofits that have lost funding or fear they might. 2H RAWSEP View nonprofits affected by Trump defunding are asked to contact the New York Times to tell their stories. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates of 501c3 nonprofit organization. New York Times, January 31st, 2025. More voices, better journalism. The questionnaire you are reading is just one tool we use to help ensure our work reflects the world we cover. By inviting readers to share their experiences, we get a wide range of views that often lead to a more deeply reported article. We make every effort to contact you before publishing any part of your submission, and your information is secure. Hear more on how it works and why it's good for us and you. This is a time of fear and worry in the nonprofit world. The Trump administration has taken extraordinary steps to reduce federal grant funding to nonprofit groups. It has largely shut off foreign aid. It briefly froze all outgoing grants. Now, even though that broad freeze has been lifted, the White House says it is reviewing thousands of grants to see if they conflict with President Trump executive orders banning woke ideologies. Tens of thousands of U.S. nonprofits, aid groups, universities, hospitals, and many more rely on government grants for a significant part of their funding. If your nonprofit is among them, I would like to hear about it. Have you removed any content from your website or changed any policies that might conflict with President Trump executive orders? 3A Canada tariffs. Hear what to know about Trump tariffs. Canada, Mexico, and China account for more than a third of the products brought into the United States. Tariffs could lead to higher prices for consumers. 3A RAWSEP View. The Trump tariffs on goods from Canada and Mexico, as well as China, are expected to lead to higher prices for United States consumers. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates of 501c3 nonprofit organization. New York Times, February 1st, 2025. President Trump on Saturday signed executive orders imposing sweeping tariffs on the country's three largest trading partners, a move that risks unleashing a damaging trade war. Trade wars were a feature of Trump's first term in the White House too, but his latest tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China, which are set to take effect at 12:01 a.m. Eastern Time on Tuesday, may broaden the scale of disruptions. The three countries account for more than a third of the products brought into the United States, supporting tens of millions of American jobs. All goods imported from Canada and Mexico will be subject to a 25% tariff, except Canadian energy products, which will face a 10% tariff. According to the executive orders, the orders also placed a 10% tariff on Chinese goods. The auto and electric equipment sectors in Mexico are most exposed to disruption from sweeping tariffs, as is mineral processing in Canada. The largest risks are to farming, fishing, metal, and auto production. Some companies may try to pass the cost on to their customers by raising prices. Others may opt to eat the cost of the tariff. Companies may also try to force foreign suppliers to bear the burden by negotiating lower prices for their products. When Trump imposed tariffs on China during his first term, economic studies found that most of those costs were passed on to American consumers. That could mean higher prices in grocery aisles, at car dealerships, and at the pump. Roughly 60% of the oil that the United States imports comes from Canada. Tariffs on Canadian energy, though lower than for other imports, could prompt an uptick in prices at the pump, especially in the Midwest. They're also concerned about inflationary pressures across the board. Efforts to bring in goods before the tariffs probably contributed to an increase in the transportation of shipping containers across North America by rail in the first 4 weeks of the year compared with the same period in 2024. 3B Canada tariffs. Trudeau details plans of Canada retaliation in emotional rebuke of Trump tariffs. Even as the Prime Minister of Canada announced more than $100 billion in retaliatory tariffs, he made clear that he was imposing them reluctantly. 3B RAWSEP View. Trudeau detailed Canada tariffs on the United States that he would target on United States Republican states. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates of 501c3 nonprofit organization. New York Times, February 2nd, 2025. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau of Canada laid out more than $100 billion in retaliatory tariffs against the United States late Saturday in a forceful response to President Trump's decision to impose levies on a range of Canadian goods, but he made clear that Canada was doing so reluctantly. We do not want to be here, Trudeau said in a somber televised address from Ottawa that evoked the deep bonds between the two neighbors and close trading partners. We did not ask for this, Trudeau spoke hours after President Trump hit Canada and Mexico with tariffs of 25% on all goods with a partial carve-out for Canadian energy and oil exports. Trudeau said that Canada would swiftly impose its own far-reaching retaliatory tariffs of 25% on 155 billion Canadian dollars, $106 billion worth of U.S. goods. Initial tariffs worth 30 billion Canadian dollars will start on Tuesday when the U.S. tariffs go into effect. Trudeau said that will be followed by tariffs on 125 billion Canadian dollars worth of goods in the next 3 weeks. A delay, he said, would allow Canadian businesses to prepare. Canada had indicated that it would tax Florida orange juice, Tennessee whiskey, and Kentucky peanut butter products from states with Republican senators. Trudeau said on Saturday night that Canada tariff list would also include products like beer, wine, vegetables, perfume, clothing, shoes, household appliances, furniture, and sports equipment, and materials like lumber and plastics. He added that more measures were being considered, including curbing or taxing energy exports that the United States relies on. Trudeau addressed Americans directly, saying that the U.S. tariffs on Canadian goods would harm them too. This is a choice that, yes, will harm Canadians, but beyond that, it will have real consequences for you, the American people. He said, as I have consistently said, tariffs against Canada will put your jobs at risk, potentially shutting down American auto assembly plants and other manufacturing facilities, but I know we are going to make it through this, he added, because we have the most successful partnership the world has ever seen. 3C Canada tariffs. Trump Canada and Mexico tariffs could hurt car makers General Motors and a few other companies make as much as 40% of their North American cars and trucks in Canada and Mexico, leaving them vulnerable to tariffs. 3C RAWSEP View Canada and Mexico tariffs will raise prices on 40% of automobiles sold in the United States. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates of 501c3 nonprofit Organization New York Times February 1st, 2025 Almost all automakers are going to feel a pinch from the new tariffs imposed by President Trump on Saturday on goods imported from Canada, Mexico, and China. Auto manufacturers ship tens of billions of dollars worth of finished automobiles, engines, transmissions, and other components each week across the U.S. borders with Canada and Mexico. Billions of dollars more are imported from parts manufacturers in China. The tariffs, which will take effect at 12:01 a.m. on Tuesday, are widely expected to raise the prices that American consumers pay for new automobiles, and the tariffs come at a time when new cars and trucks are already selling for near record prices. General Motors, the largest U.S. automaker, will probably be most affected. GM produces many more vehicles in Mexico than any other manufacturer, over 842,000 in 2024. All of the Chevrolet Equinox and Blazer sport utility vehicles GM sells in the United States come from Mexico. The Chevrolet Silverado pickup truck, a top-selling model, and the similar GMC Sierra pickup generate huge profits for the company. Of the more than 1 million of those trucks built last year, nearly half were produced in Canadian and Mexican plants. All told, GM plants in Canada and Mexico produced nearly 40% of all vehicles the company made last year in North America. Several other automakers, including Stellantis, Toyota, and Honda, also make about 40% of their North American cars and trucks in Canada and Mexico, but they produce fewer vehicles than GM, so most automakers may not feel the impact of the tariffs as acutely as GM. The lobbying group representing the 3 Detroit automakers, the American Automotive Policy Council, issued a statement saying that vehicles and parts that comply domestic and regional content rules of the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement should be exempt from. Toyota makes some RAV4 SUVs in the United States, but most come from plants in Woodstock and Cambridge, Ontario. The company also makes Lexus SUVs in Ontario. Honda is in a similar position with its Civic sedan and CR-V SUV. Most are made in Alliston, Ontario. 3 of Volkswagen top-selling vehicles in the United States, the Jetta sedan and the Taos and Tiguan SUVs, are made in Mexico. In 2024, Volkswagen sold more than 230,000 Mexican-made vehicles in the United States. About 70% of its sales in the country. Ford Motor Mustang Mach-E, Maverick pickup, and Bronco Sport are assembled in Mexico. Ford makes engines at 2 plants in Windsor. Ford made nearly 25 million vehicles in North America last year, and more than 82% rolled off U.S. assembly lines. Only 2% of Ford production came from Canada and 16% from Mexico. Ford is the most committed to building in America among the major automakers, the company said in a statement in late November in reference to why its stock had fallen less than other automakers after Trump election. 3D Canada tariffs news analysis. Trump favors blunt force in dealing with foreign allies and enemies alike with Canada, Mexico, China, Colombia, and the Middle East. President Trump has wasted no time threatening to use American might to force recalcitrant countries to back down and do what he wants. 3D RAWSEP View. Trump is using blunt force in dealing with both traditional allies and traditional enemies. The rest of the world does not like it. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity. And relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. New York Times February 2nd, 2025 President Trump has demonstrated that he prefers to bludgeon, not bargain, his way to foreign policy goals with counterparts from Asia, the Middle East, and North and South America. Trump has shown a willingness to use American power in a way that most of his modern predecessors have not. His favorite blunt instrument is not military force but economic coercion, like the tariffs he ordered on Saturday on goods from Canada, Mexico, and China. The tariffs set to take effect Tuesday amount to a declaration of economic war against America, 3 largest trading partners, which have threatened to retaliate in a tit-for-tat that could escalate beyond any such conflict in generations if he makes the targeted countries back down quickly in response to his demand to do more to stop drug trafficking. Trump will take it as a validation of his strategy. If not, and the tariffs take force and remain in place for a prolonged period, American consumers could pay a price through higher costs on many goods. Trump is dispensing with other traditional tools of American foreign policy. He has suspended much of the international aid provided by the United States and may try to dismantle the U.S. Agency for International Development, whose website went offline on Saturday. Such aid, while a tiny fraction of the overall federal budget, has for generations been seen as a way to build goodwill and influence around the world. To Trump, though, the old ways did not work, and if the rest of the world does not like it, Trump has made clear he does not really care.